Welcome, friends, to another episode of On Death, a podcast where we explore the oftentimes taboo topics of death, dying, and grief. We offer people a place to gather and listen to others around their experience with death and dying. We aim to encourage and support a healthy relationship with death and to move from a fear-based culture of death to a community focused on living life more fully alive and fully in love. And today, like always, I'm joined with my beautiful co-host, Tom. Tom, do you want to introduce our guest for today, please?
Yes, would love to. Today, we've got somebody on the show who we have crossed paths many times. I even photographed him once. I think it's about 4 or 5 years ago now. And without realizing that later on we would cross paths again, not realizing that we had done that before. His name is Ethan Lipsitz, and he started a movement called the Love Exremist project. And he did this back in 2015 with this simple symbol of a heart, the word extremist inside of it. And since then, it has blossomed into a platform for media products, experiences, and projects that inspire new definitions and action-oriented things around love. And he was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2017. At that time, he started a new mission, which was to use creative expression in all forms to inspire love for his personal healing and his community and the world. He spends most of his time hosting salons, facilitating workshops, supporting leaders, making art, producing a podcast and a video series, and writing all about healing and creating music. So without further ado, here's Ethan to tell us all about his beautiful journey. Welcome.
Hello, hello, hello.
Thank you for being here, Ethan. Really appreciate your time.
Grateful to be here. Yeah, I appreciate the outreach and love what this podcast is all about. It's very much in my wheelhouse.
It sounds like it. We had to when we reached out to you, were just about to go with launching your Camp Death, right?
Correct. Yes, Camp Death just finished last week. And it was a 2-week program of a group of brave souls kind of going in on a journey of confronting mortality as a path to live more deeply. And so we spent 2 weeks going through daily practices that were all pathways we can choose to just confront our death and work through it and consider it in different realms. It was really powerful.
Yeah, I'm sure there's tons of awesome content that came out of there. I have like a vision. I don't know if this will happen soon, but I see people with like little ringers on from the 70s and like the velvet cutout of like Camp Death class of. You're shaking your head. Please tell me you have.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a vibe and makes a lot of sense. A la like traditional camp. We did do camp swag. The logo I designed was like a sailboat that said Camp Death on it. And then on the back was the motto. It's not a means to an end. It's just the end. Surrounded by a heart. And so that was the first edition of the camp swag, but everything's iterative. And so we'll keep going. And there's a lot of opportunity to make some pretty cool stuff for sure.
Cool. It's fun. And just to have the word death on a t-shirt in a way where it's not being like a death metal band or something where it's a little bit like crusty and like edgy in a way where you're like, yeah, well, this is about death, but it's actually about death, where you're bringing these conversations into people's lives it sounds like, and have them live their life in a real expressive, artistic, and loving way. Am I right?
Absolutely. And it's funny, I realized that I use this kind of play on language in a couple of different contexts. Creating the Love Exremist project was all about putting two words together that don't normally go together. And to me, that creates a different relationship to the word love. When we call ourselves a love extremist, we're actually thinking about love in terms that are both actionable and sometimes maybe pretty intense. And I believe it's time for extremism in the context of love. Around Camp Death, similar approach is more like, we think of camp as this fun, joyful kind of celebratory experience, and death is not necessarily the most campy thing. But I do believe that we have an opportunity to learn through death and to engage with it in new ways. And this camp provided that outlet. And the other thing I realized was, having gone to a lot of summer camps throughout my life, the process of moving through camp and then coming out the other side, you're transformed after camp. Like, it's like you just came through and you're like, oh my gosh, life will never be the same. You know, this was incredible. And then you go back to quote unquote normal life. And I wanted to have that kind of experience with camp. So yeah, again, that all came through in the program.
Nice. Yeah, it's like you're taking back, because like when I originally, if I think of Camp Death in the context of both those words individually and then put together, I just think of Jason Voorhees immediately, like Friday the 13th, all of that. But now you're taking it back and you're bringing people in to do some work and like come out with a yay on the other side. So I like that. That's awesome. I mean, did you get that sort of enthusiasm that you were hoping for out of the program?
Yeah, it's been really amazing to engage with the participants and the campers and to learn kind of, everyone's in an individual relationship with mortality. They all have different stories and approximation to death, whether it be their own or others around them. But I found that the program was really informative just to see there's no wrong answer. We all go through this in different ways. We all experience life and death in different ways. We all have different catalysts for what enlivens us or what brings us to grief. And recognizing that spectrum was really helpful in being able to come up with practices and programs where, you know, there's something for everyone. Some people really make a death meditation their deal. And they're like, I'm going to do this for the next 100 days, and this is going to inform my life. And for others, it's more of a journaling prompt or gratitude exercise or something like that.
Yeah, meeting people where they are, meeting people with death where they are, or the relationship with death where they are. Are you planning? This is like a selfish question, because I never really went to any camp. The only camp I ever did, I might have been in like third grade, and it was in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. And it wasn't like a sleepaway camp. It was like you get dropped off there for a few hours. And the only thing I remember doing is playing Bloody Knuckles. Like, I had no transformative experience. You know, I just went home with like my knuckles all kind of fucked up. Is there a vision to do an actual physical Camp Death, and when we can meet again?
There isn't yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's interesting. This idea came to us, I should say, pretty quickly. I had a scan recently. I get a scan of my brain every 6 months, and I had a scan that came through that was potentially sketchy. We weren't sure if the tumor was growing. And I say we, me and my partner were kind of facing this challenging scan. And we had 4 weeks until they were going to do another scan to check and make sure, is there a tumor growing or is it just a false alarm? The good news is it turned out it was a false alarm, and my partner and I celebrated when we got that news. But those 4 weeks were kind of a revisitation of my mortality and the fact that I'm living with this disease of brain cancer that doesn't really leave. It's a managed thing, but it's a terminal diagnosis. And so recognizing that that's part of my existence and kind of regrouping with it past the acute phase, which was the first 3-4 years of living with this thing, was really intense. And so we kind of, in our celebration, my partner, Michelle, was like, you should do Camp Death. Like, this would be so interesting and teach all the things you've learned. And initially she said Death Camp. And I was like, no, we can't do that. But maybe Camp Death we could do. And I still have gotten some flack for the name, so it may change. But I do think that there's an interesting kind of epiphany that took place. I rushed into getting the program going, like, really quickly. Basically took 3 days, made a landing page, like, was ready to blast it, made a whole video. And my partner, Michelle, came back and was like, what are you doing? Like, have you even processed what just happened? Like, whoa, pump your brakes. I'm like, yeah. And I kind of broke down at that point and realized, like, it was a pretty intense moment, and I had been holding it together for myself and for others, and really needed some time to, like, just let it go and cry and process and understand what I just been through. And then start to think about developing something really meaningful and spend some time promoting it and getting, the curriculum dialed and all that stuff. So I was really happy that I waited, but yeah, the process of it happening came pretty quickly. And yeah, it went live a month after we basically had the idea.
Ethan, can we go back to 2017 for a moment?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about what the initial prompt to go, I don't know any of the story, whether it was you went to a doctor or a neurologist. And I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for about a year before then, I noticed I was losing mobility in my right leg. My right foot was kind of numb and I couldn't move my toes like I could my left foot. And I was frustrated and it was annoying and I was having a hard time like doing certain activities. I was a skateboarder and noticed that starting to get sketchy. I could still like do most stuff, but my foot was just irritating me. And I asked friends, is this something to worry about? Like, do you have this problem? And a lot of them said, yeah, don't worry about it. Just get some yoga toes and spread them out and, you'll be fine. And I tried that and it wasn't really getting better. And then I scheduled an appointment with a podiatrist because I thought I had this foot problem. And 2 weeks before that appointment, I got really sick. I had a fever all day and I went home from work early and basically got into bed. I was tossing and turning in bed and finally fell asleep, oscillating between fever, hot flashes, cold flashes, finally fall asleep. And in the middle of the night, I'm awakened by my right leg lifting over me. And I thought it was a muscle spasm where I was just kind of, it tenses up and you lose control. But it started kind of rising and spasming. And then that feeling started to like basically numb out my whole right side. And I started to feel it kind of capture my body. And then quickly my left side fell to this numbness. And as it fell, my body started arching, my back started arching really, really like dramatically to the point where I thought I was going to break my back. And I willed myself to fall off the bed. And my partner at the time, who was sleeping in the other room, heard me fall off the bed. I don't remember falling off the bed. I went unconscious at that point. She found me in the room on the floor and EMTs came. They wanted to take me to the hospital then and there, but I couldn't move. I was super dizzy and nauseous. Turned out next morning, we kind of made it through the night. Broke the fever. The next morning woke up, got to urgent care, basically realized I had a seizure that night. Urgent care, when you have a seizure, they rush you to the front of the line. You don't have to wait. And they throw you in a CAT scan. And we found that I had a little egg-sized tumor in my brain. And the news came in a kind of weird way. But the doctor at the urgent care was like, it's just like a piece of flan. They'll just scoop it out. They'll open your brain up. You'll probably be awake. It'll be really cool. And they'll scoop it out of your head. And I'm just kind of thinking like, what's going on? Like, I'm going to be awake. You're going to open my head. Like, what's like, she didn't use the C word, and I didn't really hear cancer at all until the ambulance came to drive me from the urgent care to the emergency room. And he's like, so you got cancer, huh? And I'm like, what? And so I'm kind of getting thrown all this crazy news and just trying to stay calm. The next few days I was in the hospital kind of dealing with doctors. I was on seizure watch. So they gave me some seizure medication. They gave me some steroids. And we decided to go into surgery 2 weeks later, ended up coming back to Boston for surgery. And the crazy thing about surgery and this whole process was surgery, I just learned this from an anesthesiologist, it's a controlled trauma. And so while some of us may experience traumas that are not controlled, most of us, the controlled trauma is actually like being manipulated by an anesthesiologist and a surgeon and all these other people who are kind of doing it. But the night before, I was very much in this kind of spiritual headspace and I was saying some prayers and I actually had some visions of people coming to my bedside. And throughout that experience, there was very much this really interesting kind of feeling of like, all right, I'm going to be proximate to death. My brain's going to be opened up to the air. My skull's going to be cracked open. It turned out I was asleep for the surgery, which I was grateful for. But they were running electricity from my head to my feet. I was, being pumped through the drugs to keep me under. And then after that, I had staples in my head, and I was kind of recovering with this crazy scar across my skull, which you can still kind of see parts of. The hair doesn't grow back because I got radiated and chemotherapized after that. But yeah, this was 2017, 2 weeks later, I get a diagnosis, grade 3 brain cancer. That came out of the biopsy. The surgery took out 20% of the tumor. So radiation and chemotherapy took out a bunch more. But a lot of my lifestyle changes, like diet and therapy and shifting my profession and reorienting my life completely around healing, I think has made a huge contribution to my well-being through this point. But 2017 was pretty major. Also, 10 years before that, 2007, I got hit in the head with a Jack Daniels bottle in exactly the place where my tumor occurred. And so that experience of being mugged and taking that hit, then kind of having this delicate spot of my brain where a tumor shows up, I don't think it's a coincidence. And there's a lot of research that shows brain trauma is long lasting and can affect us in some pretty wild ways. And so I'm processing all of that as well. So the journey began long before the seizure, actually.
When 2017 happens, you fall down, have this seizure. You're in the ER or the urgent care. They take you to the hospital. Like what's, because I'm going to make like an assumption. Have you done like any sort of death work up until then?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've had a little bit of like tools in your belt.
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've done a lot of, I would say, like spiritual work in different contexts. So I think at that point I was comfortable if death was what was happening. I didn't want to die, and I was a little scared, but I also felt like, oh man, I've lived an incredible life and I have nothing but gratitude. And if this is it, this is it. And this is what's going to happen. And I don't think this is it. And I don't really want it to be it. And I do feel like I have some sovereignty in this. And now that certain things are becoming illuminated, especially around mortality and like the sensitivity of my body and the reality of this diagnosis and disease, I felt like, this isn't going to be the worst news. Like it's going to be bad. Maybe. I wasn't sure about whether cancer was a real thing until I got that official diagnosis, but I knew I was hoping it wouldn't be that, but I also kind of felt like I'm going to live a long life. I still am in that mentality of I'm going to live a long, healthy life. And I'm working with death every day. And I'm working to remain in that sense of gratitude and awareness so that I can, if tomorrow's the end, I'm okay with that and I'm comfortable with it and I'm grateful.
And for people, Ethan, who are just listening, 2017, can you share how old you were?
I was 33.
So just so people understand, 33 years old, you get this serious diagnosis and you have a moment of like, fuck yeah, kind of moment, like of like the celebration of life. And I think a little bit of like, since we've been talking for just a handful of minutes now, it seems like you had some practice, some contemplation, and had a sense of like your mortality in a way. So whenever that time does come, there is like a fuck yeah moment. And it seems like even now, like the work you're doing with Camp Death is that like when we get the diagnosis, however old we may be, 33, 99, that there is like this sense of, wow, that was a pretty full life. Like that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, there is. And I also should say, like, I was not married. I was not a father. And, my responsibilities were such that I could let go of a lot of things to focus on healing. So as I now am engaged and consider having a family and other contexts of, adding responsibilities to my life and loved ones and on tax forms, dependents, but I would say more so just expanding my my impact in the people that I love and that I think about, that I am getting to know. There's a lot more life I'd like to live. And I think while that fuck yeah could still exist, I think there's also a desire to remain resilient and to remain in this body as long as I can. And I think there's something about acceptance and readiness that I oscillate between. I want to be in acceptance. I think that's a really important element of life, but I also want to push a little hard and put some effort in to stick around. And I think that dynamic is, it's not one or the other, but it's kind of keeping both of those present.
Yeah. When you say, I know Tom wants to jump in there. I just want to comment when you say acceptance, like the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of dying.
Stages of
like
grief,
you said,
right?
Say again, Ethan.
I think it's stages of grief. Is that what you meant?
There's that's the, I said David Kessler. I said David Kessler, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, like the stages of grief and stages of dying. They're the same. They just adapted them. And like you said, that we oscillate between them, right? Like, so there is acceptance, but then there's, back to bargaining. Like I want more time, like I'm thinking of a family. Like I want to get married. I want to have kids. Like I want to be here. I want to be here. Mm-hmm. So Tom, I know you were about to perk up and say something. I cut you off. You're muted, pal. Tom has peacocks in the background that get wild sometimes.
Peacocks, parrots, it's a jungle.
Love that.
I wanted to thank you for bringing it back to what's important, which is dependence on your tax forms. That's good. Just to keep that in mind. There are these layers of, I was thinking about exactly this as you were describing your experience of like, well, it's been great, and I've mentioned on the podcast before that I had a moment where I was staring at what I thought would be instantaneous death. It was a car accident, and I don't have to get into the story again, but I remember having a similar sentiment of wow, it's been really fun. If this is it, okay, take me. And I thought, as you were describing it, it's funny because we're about the same age. I just turned 40, and now also being engaged and also thinking of bringing another life into the world. It's interesting how, I would look at a 20-year-old and think like their view of death is so flippant, and I'll speak even to myself at 20 and how reckless I felt at that time. And now to think even just a few years ago for me to sort of just be like, well, if it ends, it ends, that almost feels flippant to me when I consider having a partner, a life partner and a child. And I'm wondering now, as I get older and these complexities start piling on, is it actually harder to let go?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways of looking at that. Some would argue I had created a lot of complexity. I ran my own business. I had like 20 employees. I don't know, I bought a house, like a lot of these more material things, I'd say. But yeah, I think when it comes to like what matters at the end of our life, usually it's really oriented around love. And yeah, our accumulation of loves, and not only accumulation, but commitment to those loves and sense of responsibility around them is a little different when we get in partnership, and especially lifelong partnership. And we also, become parents, right? And so certainly that could happen with an animal, if we have a dog or a cat or a pet or a peacock or whatever. But I think there's definitely a consideration there that shifts the dynamic, and I think it only adds to the gratitude and also adds to the delicacy, which I think is a really important element here. Like looking at life as a delicacy, and also the body is a delicate thing. The body is a delicacy, right? Like having these instruments to create with, to engage with, to meditate with. And so it's almost like there's that depth of responsibility and opportunity. Yeah, there's more to lose, but there's also so much more to gain. And there's I don't know, more is a relative term, but I think we need these confluences. We need these kind of pulls and pushing ourselves into new levels of responsibility and dependency and opportunity, and love, of course, is going to make grief and death that much harder. But grief doesn't exist without love. Like we don't grieve things that we didn't love or care for. And so it's kind of a necessary part of the whole system.
Yeah, one of the things I hear you saying there is even as death looms over all of us, to engage in life as robustly as we can and with as much love as we can, not to like step away from life and go into, a mode of hiding because death looms. Let's go into our life like full on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to live and you got to love harder when death comes a knocking, I think, because that's your little note. And for me, I started Love Exremist in 2015, but like it didn't fully hit in my body and I didn't know how to love myself. And in 2017, I mean, I'm still working on self-love, but I was forced to love myself. I was like, okay, you're going to figure out what self-love looks like in practice so that you can heal, so that you can live a longer life. And I think that's a core component of this. Like death comes a knocking and there's choices, actually, I should say. There's a lot of people who get that knock and kind of surrender and maybe get into a level of acceptance or step back from like living full on. And in some ways, my foot still has disability and I get really frustrated by weakness in my body. And that keeps me a little bit stepped back and reserved. Professionally, I still haven't gotten into a full-time role. So, that's another thing. I've kind of stepped back a little bit on the professional side, although I'm doing everything all the time. But that is kind of a traditional career thing that I think about. And I do think like there are elements of us stepping back all the time, but the call to step in and to live more deeply and fully is a choice that we can make. And the whole point of this camp I just did is to make that choice every day and help people do that and use death as the mirror to do it. And I think oftentimes, like I was saying, people can choose the opposite or choose something in between where they're kind of not quite comfortable coming back to full life. And that's a choice. And sometimes it's not a choice. Sometimes we're disabled and we're not able to come back, and that's legit. And we need to honor that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm noticing this trend of yours where it seems like, and I don't know if I can exactly connect the thread, but I'm noticing that you sort of have this, like this Love Exremist thing came up. And then I don't know, based on your description right now, I don't know if you started your self-love exploration before or after that, but there was this sort of like, it's almost like by putting Love Extremist into the world, it kind of forced you or pushed you to explore your own self-love in a deeper way, in the same ways that you're doing with Camp Death. And it was just moments after you, or shortly after you got that little scare, that you created Camp Death it seems like to help you even explore what that means. So I love that you can, and I think that's actually kind of what we're doing in this podcast too, with Matthew and I. It's like, well, we know that we don't have all of the answers because there are infinite answers. So this topic is passionate to us, and we're going to go out there and create, just like you're doing, you're creating this community to sort of help you wrap your head around what it is that's going on for you. I think that's a beautiful way to engage with the world.
Thank you. Yeah. Trying to always be a beginner and a student. And also I think curiosity is one of the core components of being a loving human. And when we're curious about things and we can share that curiosity with others and engage, we build understanding, right? We build connection, we build compassion and unity. And so I think, there's a lot there. And I think, learning by doing is the only way I know how to do it.
And what a great thing that is to foster sort of, it kind of takes the gatekeepers out of the wisdom of humanity. It's no longer that we have to rely on a specific person to teach us everything we need to know. We're redefining this as we go together.
Yeah, and I don't prescribe definitions on anyone else. I can only share my story. You know, in our community, we speak from the I. And I think that's really important, that we don't necessarily speak for others unless we're given permission to. But, you know, I think we share our own vulnerable stories, and that's how we connect and learn and understand each other more deeply.
You're making me think about just being, we only get one death, right? So that we know of. So be as empowered in your death as you can when you have it. And if someone wants to make what someone else may think of as like bad choices, but it's not their choice to make, it's our choice to make. It's your choice to make. It's your choice to make. I'm a little curious about what was the initial sort of self-love practices like back, 3.5 or so years ago?
Yeah, well, there was a couple, and there were a lot that I share, but I'd say the core, there was kind of the intellectual, and then there's the embodied. And so on an intellectual capacity, I mean, I shifted my diet. I dropped sugar and carbohydrates, and went into a therapeutic ketogenic diet to support my chemotherapy and radiation, and then to try to keep my tumor from growing, because brain tumors feed on sugar. So I cut sugars out of my diet as much as I could. I started going to therapy, realizing that there was some stuff that was not processing well. I did some therapeutic massage, which was really powerful, and just a lot of like work in the gut, and realizing like I had been so well trained to figure out how to use this, brain, but actually like the communication with the heart and the gut weren't really well set up. And I just intuitively knew I needed to really clear out my gut, and diet was part of that, and massage and other things. I went to a teacher healer, and I've been going to them since before I moved to Los Angeles, I'd say maybe 2007. I've always been interested in alternative practitioners and teachers and healers of different arts. And I went to someone who suggested I figure out my perfect day and live that day as much as possible. And when I started, I was back in Los Angeles. I couldn't drive. I was on seizure watch. I was going to radiation every day. So I started riding my bike and taking public transit, being out in public. I'd meditate at the Self-Realization Fellowship next to where I was going to get my therapy every day. And I'd go get a coffee, and I just discovered these little things that really lit up my day, that made my day great. And we all have these things that can make a day great, and they're not expensive. They're not going out to Bali or leaving our home. They're like within reach, right? We have the tools, whether it's a bicycle or just taking a walk outside, or going outside in the sun outside your home, or having a coffee and slowly reading the paper, right? There are all these little rituals we can do that can turn into a combination of rituals that become a perfect day. And so that perfect day exercise that I was challenged to figure out became really my mantra and my lifestyle. And I learned that even within these kind of challenging moments of engaging in therapy and radiation, I was getting to know other people in the radiation room and connecting with my doctors and making it perfect for me on my terms, even though it was a dismal situation in a lot of ways. I took some THC because that was helping me with my chemotherapy and dizziness. And that was a fun experiment. And I kind of treated a lot of this stuff kind of like, okay, this is a new experience, this is a new experiment. Let's see how it goes, and let's see how we can make it enjoyable and maybe even pleasurable. Slowing down, allowing myself to be sensitive, taking naps. I mean, so many things, just appreciating nature, which we all have access to in some way. And then over time, that perfect day evolved. And I actually had kind of like a lead up moment where I was visualizing this car I wanted to buy and paint. And I ended up doing it. I bought an old Honda sports car. I painted it with 5 different colors in a crazy, wild way. My buddy Daniel, who's a photographer, hopped in the passenger seat with me, and we drove from LA to Cabo and celebrated New Year's Eve in Cabo and crashed a friend's wedding down there, and then drove back. And so took photos the whole way, had this incredible experience, like 9 days of crazy driving through Mexico in a tiny Honda sports car that wasn't designed for Baja at all, like hitting like animals, and we didn't hit any animals, but almost hitting animals, hitting a lot of potholes, changing tires, the whole deal. It was wild. But we had an incredible time. And then we came back, and the next vision was like, let's have a show and let's show our photos from this trip. And that turned into an incredible success and sold out. And then I basically fell over backwards into being a visual artist. And I was asked to paint murals in other cars, and Soho House here in Los Angeles asked me to paint their textiles. And so this evolution and kind of falling into becoming a visual artist happened through chasing that perfect day. And now I look back and I realize I was actually a quantum leap, which is something that people talk about a lot, where you can kind of reorient your life so that things can happen in a really quick time frame. That pretty much all happened between, the end of 2017 and the middle of 2018. And I became a professional visual artist, being paid for my work across the country within a matter of 6 months, because I was following this internal compass and understanding what really lit me up. And other people, that's infectious. People want to be a part of that. People want to smile at the car. They want to buy the art. They want to be a part of what's making your day perfect. And sometimes that rubs off.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing that is contagious, and I really like hearing how the perfect day. So sometimes people have so much pressure, right? Well, what's your perfect day? And it's like they just want to get it right. But what sounds like what you're saying is your perfect day starts with really simple ritual. Like you said, you don't need to go to Bali. Your perfect day might be walking outside and getting your feet in the dirt. Followed by a cup of coffee, or like making eye contact with a stranger and saying, I love you with your eyes, and little by little, the perfect day grows and grows and grows and grows. And next thing you know, no animals were harmed in your trip to Cabo, and here you are like 6 months later and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And wow. Awesome. Also, if you're listening, your 6 months will come when it comes. Right. It might be 2 years. It might be 6 years. No pressure there. Right? We're all these unique expressions of love, and we evolve in how we evolve. So for anyone who's thinking like already starting their, we'll get there.
Yeah, totally. And just to piggyback on that, I mean, like that was an incredible moment. I'd say, now 6 months then turned in, like now it's 3.5 years later, 3 years later, and it's slowed down. We're not always moving at that pace. And also I'd say the perfect day remains the coffee, the quiet meditation outside, the sitting outside and having a drink and watching the sunset at the end of the day, reading the paper on Sundays. Like perfect day ingredients can be integrated into every day. And that's what makes them perfect. And so this kind of crazy, wild quantum leap story was built out of developing a muscle of understanding what perfection felt like in my body. But we don't always get that hit. And I think just practicing what lights us up in any moment helps us become more aware of those bigger leaps that we may want to take it, when the time is right.
Mm-hmm. The perfect day. I'm curious if we can go there. The perfect death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a feeling that you've probably thought about this.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I'm thinking about it a lot. And I also am thinking about it in the context of a wedding that I'm planning with my fiance, right? Because to me, we have these only a few major occasions in our lives when we really get to celebrate love. And that's not my intention. I want to celebrate love every day, but there are these, specific milestones that occur. And I think like the perfect wedding where I'm surrounded by friends and family, who I love and who love me, I think death is something I would love to experience in some form of community. It's just the type of person I am. I feel so lit up by being around loved ones and being able to engage with everyone and share collectively celebration, even if it's an end, and to honor the emotionality of that and to find nuanced ways of celebrating it, whether that be through music or just eye contact or conversation or jokes. I think humor is really important in my life. And, my partner and I love laughing with each other. And I think like even through this diagnosis and everything that's happened, humor remains and will always remain. Gallows humor, it's part of the deal. So to me, it's more about feelings than I'd say it is about like a specific framework, but the feelings I want to feel are surrounded by loved ones, and able to celebrate. I'd like to know if something's coming, I'm at least comfortable. Hopefully it's not after a long period of discomfort, but maybe a short period of discomfort or none. That would be perfect. And if we can kind of nip it in the bud and say, okay, like you're about to go through hell, so let's let things end here. Whatever that looks like. I mean, I imagine by the time it's time, medically assisted will be appropriate or okay. We'll see. But, I'm not against that. And I think that's a totally like strong option when we know, we're close to an end and we don't need to drag it on. It's like, let's end this on our terms, not on the terms of a disease or the terms of a hospital. So ideally not in a hospital and in a comfortable spot.
That's incredible. Thanks for sharing. And I, also about the medical assisted, we actually just left one of our little bonus episodes talking about, would you, if it were legal, and it's always an interesting question to hear people's answers to, and it's nice to know yours, for sure. And I also really appreciate you saying it's a lot about like the feeling, the stuff that you want to be loved with people that you love. You want there to be humor and a lot of times when you ask people who haven't had a chance to attend Camp Death or contemplate death or maybe even have like a terminal diagnosis come up or a scare come up, you ask people how they want to die. And usually it's suddenly while you're sleeping with no pain. Right. And the more that I talk with people around this, who are interested in this work and interested in this conversation, I don't always get the suddenly and in my sleep. I think that we have like you said, Ethan, I don't want it to be very painful for very long. Right? But there's almost like a presence we can be with death as it happens, because we only get one and on your terms. And if you, like you said, if at a certain point, if it becomes like, okay, it's time to tap out. It's my body's shutting down. I'm in a lot of pain. We don't know how long that will last. Thanks for sharing that. That was really incredible to hear.
Something that came up where you were just speaking is kind of the culture of ghosting, no pun intended. But like we live in a world where relationships end via ghosting. It's the easier way to go. We cancel people if we don't want to deal with the conflict. And I actually think like if we think about what love looks like in practice, love is conflict. Love is heartbreak. Love is grief. Love is challenging, right? And yeah, I want to be with the people I love when I die. And maybe it's not going to be all laughter. Maybe there's going to be a lot of tears, and that's beautiful too. And the conflict of that and celebrating or honoring the grief of the moment together and being able to be part of it, to me is real life and confronting like one of the rare opportunities to live with depth that we get And that avoidance of that depth is the same thing as numbing out to whatever else you want to numb out to, I think. So like we all have it. I'm not knocking it. We all got to numb out. But the more we can kind of drop those numbing agents and come into, especially when it comes to love, I think the more we live a meaningful, deep life. And that's my thesis.
Yeah. Thanks for taking a couple of feet off the stock of the Disney look at what love is, of like, I felt like you really cut that down a little bit of like, love isn't just all kittens and rainbows and laughter. And it is a lot about like, how do you wrestle together?
My partner says love is metal.
Totally. Love is metal for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I along with the adaptation of death as being normal, I would love for societies to start adopting that love is metal too. It's not kittens and rainbows all the time.
Are we talking both heavy metal and heavy metals? Because I can get behind both of those.
Sure. Yeah. I think of heavy metal for sure, but both, yes, heavy metals as well. Yeah. And that's the whole reason why it's Love Extremists, like this isn't a joke, and I think a lot of people roll their eyes when they hear love because of the Disneyfication of it all. And, I'm talking about love in politics. I'm talking about love at work. I'm talking about love in activism, which is actually very present. But I think there's a lot of spaces where we love in education, and even it's interesting, the people we're most proximate to sometimes are the hardest ones to love. And what's with that, right? Why are we so avoidant? And I think it comes back to this kind of fear of conflict, fear of being honest. And that's really where the meat of life is.
Yeah. That hits right on this question that I was dying to ask. As I recently was having a conversation with a friend who found out that her grandfather is slipping quickly to the other side, and I kind of we were talking about how we engage with our elders and our parents, and one thing that came up for me in that moment was that I want to hold my parents' hands before they're dying. It's something that like I don't really do. I don't sit next to my mom and hold her hand.
Mm.
I don't spend like that kind of loving intimacy, that intimate time with my parents. And I'm curious with you. You're at your parents' house now. Yeah. How has this experience, this journey changed your relationship with your parents? If it has, and if you want that to change even further, I'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, no, I think it's very much still in evolution. It's been interesting and important kind of witnessing them, but also noticing, they're not as open emotionally with me about how they're feeling around my diagnosis. And also, I think about their mortality a bit and notice it, as they get older more. But that's an area of inquiry that I want to continue to work on. And I think getting through and being able to communicate across conflict is a big part of that. And our family, just where we're from and the way that we engage is not the way that I engage with a lot of other people in my life. And so I'm working to lubricate those relationships and get closer and get that comfort level and maintain it and strengthen it. But I'd say, I have a very loving, incredible family, and there's always feels like space for us to deepen our connection and our love and our appreciation for each other while we have each other. And I think sometimes we get caught up in, forgetting about that pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have to mention that this podcast has a great way to bring up little sound bites in the back. And as we talk about the parental relationship, and the sirens in the background are fucking blazing. I'll take a moment and just like send some wishes out to whoever is those either fire trucks or ambulances are going to, that they're all safe, and not just safe, like a moment where we can send like prayers to all of the people in the ambulance, the fire truck, and their families, to have this rippled out effect of love and beauty. So they're doing great work there. And Ethan, you're doing great work. I want to stay on and talk, but we do have somewhat of time limits on these things. Really appreciate the work that you're doing. You're speaking my language. As soon as like anything with love comes up and then death follows, like sign me up. So where can people sign up or check out what you have going on in the future?
Yeah, I'd love for you to join me at extremist.love. And that's a website where you can sign up and get our newsletter, and I'll keep you abreast of everything happening. The next iteration of camp, I'm giving a talk about self-love and what it actually means. And that'll be including some of the practices we talked about and a little bit more on the 31st of August on my birthday. And it's on the platform Bright, which is a cool new video platform that's kind of like a Clubhouse meets video. And so check out Bright, and we'd love to see you there. It's cheap ticket. It's going to be really cool, and you can come up and ask questions and engage with me there. And then Clubhouse is a place where I do spend a bit of time, and I host a lot of conversations in the Love Exremist Club. That's grown a lot through the pandemic as this kind of virtual outlet for gathering and salon, and sometimes I record my podcast there as well. And that's just the Love Extremist Club on Clubhouse. So those are the three sweet spots to find me these days. And I'd love to hear from folks in your audience, and you too as well. It's definitely a conversation that we could have for a long time.
Right on. Awesome. Well, Ethan, thank you for your time, sharing your stories. I hope you get to hold your parents' hands while you're there. Selfishly project that desire on you.
Thank you.
And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I guess that wraps us up this time around.
Again, just thanks for your time, Ethan. Really, your story is incredible. Your presence is incredible. You definitely have. You are like I said, speaking our language, and I can't wait to see how your offerings grow. And I'd love to be involved in some way. And I think I speak for Tom, and any way that we can support you or be part of it or promote whatever, please. So folks, please check out Ethan's websites, his podcast, his Clubhouse, his, what is that one? Bright House? I don't even know about this.
Bright. Yeah. Check out Bright.
Check out Bright.
Yeah, you can find it on Google, but it's like bright.co or something. And it's a really cool new platform for video streaming and stuff.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
All right. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.